Vera Calloway was standing in my kitchen at 11 on a Tuesday night, wearing one of my old college sweatshirts and reading the back of a soup can like it might say something worth knowing, and I was trying very hard to remember why I had ever thought this arrangement was simple. She had a key because she'd had a key for 2 years, since the week after I moved in, and she said, "You're going to lock yourself out within the first month." And she was right. It happened in 6 days. She had the sweatshirt because she always ran cold, and I had never once asked for it back. She was reading the soup can because she'd had a long day, and long days turned her into someone who stood in other people's kitchens and read labels without buying anything. I was standing in the doorway, pretending to check my phone. The soup can was chicken noodle, low sodium. She had read it twice. Her name was Vera, and she was my closest friend, and at some point in the last year, I had quietly, unsuccessfully made the mistake of realizing I was in love with her. She set the can down. "This has been in your cabinet for 4 months. I know. Why do you have soup you're never going to eat?" "Emergency purposes." She looked at me over her shoulder. "What kind of emergency requires specifically low-sodium chicken soup?" "The kind I haven't had yet." She put the can back exactly where she found it, which was the kind of thing Vera did. She noticed where things were and returned them. She had opinions about cabinet organization. She once spent 40 minutes rearranging my bookshelf by color, and then told me she wasn't going to apologize for it, which I never asked her to. I knew her better than I knew most things. I knew she took her coffee without sugar, unless she was stressed, and then she took it with too much. I knew she laughed at her own jokes 1 full second before they landed. I knew she kept a second phone charger in every bag she owned, because she had once let her phone die in an airport in Denver, and she described the experience like a trauma. What I did not know was how to tell her that somewhere between the bookshelf rearrangement and the airport charger story, I had stopped being able to look at her the way a friend was supposed to. "I'm going to sleep," she said, moving toward the hallway. She stayed over sometimes. The couch had a good blanket. We had long since stopped making it a thing. "Vera." She stopped, turned. I had nothing. "You look tired," I said. She looked at me for a second. Something moved in her expression that I couldn't name. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I am." Then she turned back down the hall, and I stood in my kitchen with the soup can and the silence and the very clear understanding that I was not going to fix this tonight. Her name in full was Vera Ann Calloway, which she hated because she said Ann sounded like a filler name, like whoever named her ran out of ideas at the last minute. She went by Vera, always Vera, and she worked as a structural engineer at a firm in downtown Chicago that did bridge projects, and had a reputation for being demanding in ways that she described as character building, and her colleagues described in words I won't repeat. I met her 3 years earlier at a friend group birthday dinner, where neither of us knew most of the people there, and we ended up sitting at the wrong end of the table, talking about whether bridges were designed to fail slowly or suddenly, which was not a normal dinner conversation topic. But Vera had just come from a stress analysis meeting, and I had just read an article I didn't understand, and it became one of those conversations that goes 2 hours without either of you noticing. She had paid for her own meal, tipped 30%, and told me my theory about suspension cables was wrong, in a way that made me want to immediately Google everything she'd said. She was right. I had Googled everything. She was completely right. We became friends the way people do when they're both a little too serious about things other people don't care about, and a little too honest about things other people leave polite. She was the person I called when something was actually wrong. Not the soft version of wrong. The kind where you needed someone who would say the true thing instead of the easy thing. I had not called her about this. About her, because telling Vera that I had feelings for her was the kind of structural problem she would analyze into the ground and also the kind that could take down the whole building if you got it wrong. The gallery opening was not my idea. My coworker Jonah had extra tickets to a photography show at the Chicago Cultural Center. Someone he knew was one of the featured artists, and he'd offered them to the office, like he was doing us a favor, which he was, but in the way where you feel slightly obligated to go. I told Vera about it on a Wednesday because she'd mentioned once, about a year earlier, that she'd wanted to see more art and had never made it happen. I remembered this. I remembered most things she said without trying. She said yes before I finished the sentence, which was how most things worked with us. The show opened on a Friday in late October. Vera wore a dark red blouse and a blazer she'd bought for a work conference, and said she was repurposing toward joy, which made me laugh in the elevator up to her apartment. She had her hair down, which she didn't do often. Mostly, she kept it up at work. Down meant she'd decided the evening was going to let her be someone slightly different from the version of herself that ran stress calculations on reinforced concrete. She looked good. She had always looked good. I was extremely practiced at not saying so. The gallery was on the second floor of the Cultural Center, which was the kind of building that made you feel underdressed even in business casual. High ceilings. High ceilings. Marble floors. The show was called Weight and Distance, which sounded like something Vera would name a bridge project. And the photographs were large format, all black and white, mostly landscapes shot from angles that made ordinary things. Water towers, overpasses, grain silos. Looked like they were holding a lot of feelings about being overlooked. Vera stopped in front of a photograph of a highway interchange taken from below. Just concrete ramps curving over each other, lit from underneath with afternoon sun. "That's a cloverleaf exchange in St. Louis," she said. "I know the firm that built it." "Of course you do. It's actually a very elegant design for high traffic volume. Most people are thinking about the composition. I'm thinking about the rebar load distribution." She paused. "Also the composition. It's good." I was not looking at the photograph. She turned and caught me. Not dramatically. She just noticed, the way Vera always noticed things, and her expression shifted in a way I couldn't fully read before she looked back at the wall. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't what? Look at me like there's something you want to say." The gallery had enough ambient noise that no one around us would have heard. Still, everything felt too close. I wasn't. You were. She kept her eyes on the photograph. "You've been doing it for a while." I didn't answer. She exhaled through her nose, almost too quiet to count as a sigh. "Let's keep looking at the show," she said, and she walked to the next photograph. I followed her. I always followed her. That was also part of the problem. The artist's name was Declan, and he was Jonah's friend, and he found us somewhere around the third room, in the way artists find people at their own openings. Slightly nervous. Holding a drink they're not drinking, keeping an eye on the crowd to see who was spending real time with the work. He was a few years older than us, wore a gray linen shirt, and had the kind of face that looked like it had been outdoors recently. He and Vera discovered within 4 minutes that they had both gone to the University of Illinois, 2 years apart, and had both hated the same specific intersection near campus because of the bus timing. They talked for 15 minutes. I stood next to Vera and learned that Declan did the photography on weekends and worked in commercial real estate during the week, that he'd been doing shows for 3 years, that this was his biggest, and that he thought the Chicago Cultural Center had better acoustics than it had any right to. Vera asked smart questions. She always did. She had a way of making someone feel like their work mattered by asking about the decisions behind it, rather than the result of it. Declan looked at her the way people sometimes looked at Vera when they first encountered the full version of her, which was like they'd expected to meet someone polite and had accidentally met someone remarkable instead. I recognized it because I had looked at her that way once, 3 years ago at the end of a dinner table, and I had never really stopped. Declan asked if we were going to the reception afterward, which was a thing he had apparently just decided to invite us to. Vera looked at me. If you want, I said. Do you want? I'm asking what you want. She turned back to Declan. Yes, she said. We'll be there. She said it without thinking, the way we always did. The way we'd been doing for 3 years. Declan smiled and moved toward the next group of guests, and Vera turned to look at a photograph of a water tower against a blank white sky, and I put my hands in my pockets and thought about the fact that she had just committed us to an evening extension as a unit, while also telling me, 20 minutes ago, not to look at her like I had something to say. I had a lot to say. I had been not saying it for the better part of a year. The reception was in the building's lower level, a long room with vaulted tile ceilings and small tables covered in white paper. Someone had set out charcuterie in the way that said, this was a real event budget, not a cheese and crackers situation. There was wine. There were people who looked like they talked about photography for fun, which I appreciated even though I was not one of them. Vera got us both a glass of red without asking me what I wanted, because she had learned 2 years ago that I would drink whatever she picked, and she found this slightly infuriating and also convenient. She handed me mine, and we found a standing spot near the far wall, away from the cluster around Declan. He's good, she said about the work. Yeah, the highway series especially. There's something about the way he shoots infrastructure that makes it look like it has a personality. You say that like infrastructure doesn't already have a personality to you. It has a structural character. That's different. She sipped her wine. He makes it feel lonely, like it's doing a hard job nobody notices. I looked at her profile. The way she was thinking about something she didn't say out loud. That sounds like you sometimes, I said, before I could stop myself. She didn't look at me. She turned the wine glass slowly in her hand. I'm going to need you to clarify that. The doing a hard job nobody notices part. People notice my job. I mean outside of work. She was quiet for a moment. Adam. My name in her mouth, just like that, with no sentence after it, was the kind of thing that made the whole room feel slightly closer together. I'm not trying to start something, I said. I know. She set her wine down on the edge of the table behind us. That's actually the part I don't know what to do with. Before I could ask what she meant, Declan appeared beside us with a woman he introduced as his friend Petra, who asked Vera what she did for work. And Vera said structural engineering, and Petra said, and Vera said, more like buildings, and Vera said, more like bridges, and Petra said, that's incredible, and Vera said, it's very detail-oriented, which was how Vera deflected when someone called her impressive. I watched her do it, and thought about how long I had been watching her do it. Petra and Declan pulled Vera into a conversation about a bridge project she'd done 2 years ago that had been featured in a trade publication, which Petra had apparently read because her firm did civil infrastructure work. It was the kind of coincidence that only happened in rooms like this one. I went to refill my wine, took slightly longer than I needed to. Found a spot at the opposite end of the table, where I could see the whole room, without being obvious about what I was looking at. She was laughing at something, Petra said. Real laugh, not the polite one. Her shoulders dropped 2 inches when she laughed like that. I had a friend from college, Marcus, who had told me 18 months ago at a rooftop bar that I was obviously in love with Vera, and I needed to either say something or find a better poker face. I had told him he was reading too much into a friendship. He had looked at me, the way you look at someone who has just said something they know is not true, but aren't ready to change yet. Marcus had been right. I had known he was right at the time. I had spent 18 months not doing anything about it. The problem was not that I didn't know how Vera felt. The problem was that I did not know, and not knowing felt safer than asking and finding out I was wrong, because if I was wrong, something changed that I did not have a backup plan for. Declan touched her elbow when he laughed. Not lingering, just a passing second of contact. The kind you do without thinking. Vera glanced over at me. I looked away, took a sip of wine. When I looked back, she was still watching me. She was quiet on the walk back to where we'd parked. The cultural center was on Michigan Avenue, and the October night had gone sharp and cold, the kind of cold that Chicago delivers without warning, like it's reminding you what it's capable of. I gave her my jacket, without asking. Which meant she was colder than she was letting on. Declan asked for my number, she said. I know. I was standing there. He seems good. He does. We walked half a block. Her heels were loud on the sidewalk. You're not going to say anything about that? She asked. What do you want me to say? I don't know. Something. I looked straight ahead. He seems like someone worth knowing. The work is honest. That usually says something about a person. She stopped walking. I took 2 more steps before I noticed and turned around. She was standing under a streetlight in my jacket, which was too big on her. Her arms crossed against the cold, looking at me with the kind of expression that meant she was deciding something. Adam, she said, my name the same way she had inside, with nothing after it. Yeah. I'm going to say something, and I need you to just let me finish. I waited. I have been giving you openings for 6 months. Her voice was steady. She used that voice when she was saying something she had thought through carefully and was nervous about anyway. Not huge ones. Not, I wasn't going to throw myself at you and get it wrong. But openings. And you have stepped around every single one, and I have decided I am too practical a person to keep doing this indefinitely. The street was mostly quiet. A cab went by. Someone's music from an upstairs window, low and indistinct. I spend a lot of time at your apartment, she said. I have a key to your apartment. I have read the back of your soup cans. I know you take exactly 1 pump of creamer in your coffee, and I know you do this thing where you go completely silent when something is bothering you, and I know that you have been bothered for a long time now. And She stopped, pressed her lips together. I would like to know if I am the reason. Because if I am the reason, I need you to say so. Because I am not going to keep pretending I don't notice things. I looked at her. The streetlight, the jacket, the fact that she had just said, in the most Vera way possible, everything I had been circling for a year. Yes, I said. You are the reason. She exhaled. 1 clean breath. Like she'd been holding it since Michigan Avenue. Okay, she said. Good. Good? Yes, Adam. Good. She uncrossed her arms. Because I have been standing in your kitchen for 2 years, and I did not keep doing that for the soup can. I laughed before I could help it. She laughed too, the real one, and stepped forward, and I met her halfway. Because that was always how we'd done everything. When I kissed her, she held onto the lapels of the jacket. My jacket. And I felt her finally, actually relax in a way she didn't let herself do, in rooms full of people. The streetlight was too bright and it was too cold, and her shoes were bad for standing still on concrete, but neither of us moved. When we finally pulled back, she kept her forehead near mine. You let me do a whole speech, she said. It was a good speech. It was a structural argument. I gave you a structural argument for why you should tell me how you feel. That's exactly what I would have wanted from you. She made a sound that was trying not to be a smile. Shut up. You quoted the soup can. Adam, I swear to God. I kissed her again because it was the only reasonable response. Declan texted her the next day. She told me about it at breakfast. She had stayed, this time for actual reasons neither of us had to explain, while she was making coffee with too much sugar, which meant she was processing something. I'm going to tell him I'm seeing someone, she said. You don't have to do that yet. She looked at me over the mugs. I know I don't have to. I want to. I handed her the creamer. 1 pump for me. She added 2 to hers, looked at me, added a 3rd. Stressful morning? I asked. New development, as it turns out. But she was smiling while she said it. We sat at my kitchen table, the one she had strong opinions about the placement of, with the morning light coming through the window that needed cleaning, and the coffee that was too sweary per day. And I thought about how none of this felt new. The kitchen, the mugs, the slightly too serious way she thought about things she was happy about. None of it was new. It just finally had the right name. Vera still had her key. She still ran cold and stole the good blanket and occasionally rearranged things on my shelves without apologizing. She still read the backs of labels in grocery stores while I waited. And she still tipped 30%. And was still completely right about things that I initially argued about before I Googled them. What changed was that she stopped editing herself in the spaces between the practical things. She said what she in the car instead of waiting until she'd filtered it into something safer. She called me when something was wrong before she'd worked it into something she could handle alone. She held my hand in parking lots, the way people do when it's not a gesture, just the default position. She also told me, about a month in, that she had noticed the openings I was giving her too, that we had spent the better part of a year handing each other doors and then politely pretending the doors were walls. We're both engineers, she said. I'm a software engineer. Same instinct. We kept load testing the structure instead of just trusting it. That is a very you way to describe falling in love. She considered this. Yes, she said. I think so. The soup can was still in my cabinet. Low sodium, chicken, noodle. She saw it one Saturday morning 3 months later and looked at me with something close to affection. You still have this. Still haven't had the right emergency. She took it off the shelf. Looked at it the same way she had that Tuesday night, back when I was standing in the doorway pretending to check my phone. Then she put it back exactly where it was. Leave it, she said. Just in case. I didn't ask in case of what. I already knew she'd have a specific answer, and it would probably be right, and I would probably look it up later just to confirm. She was almost always right. That was never going to stop being one of my favorite things about her.